Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just skip the agenda today because I want to dive straight into the everyday digital actions we all take, usually without a second thought. Every click, every scroll, every comment, it feels completely weightless, right? But what if those tiny little digital footprints actually carry massive legal consequences? Well, today we're unpacking the hidden legal architecture of our whole digital world. Okay, let's dive into this. Can hitting a simple like button on social media actually land you in court? Imagine you're just scrolling your feed, you see a post, you casually tap that little thumbs up, and boom, suddenly you are facing a full-blown lawsuit for defamation. Sounds totally extreme, doesn't it? But as our fast-paced digital world keeps colliding with traditional laws, this exact scenario actually had to be settled by some of the highest judges out there. So recently, the Austrian Supreme Court, the OGH, had to rule on exactly this issue. A user liked a highly insulting comment about someone's family photo, and the victim sued to ban them from liking those kinds of posts. The court had to step back and neutrally examine what a like actually means in that context, and they ruled that hitting like is generally seen by the average viewer as just a vague expression of unspecific antipathy. It is not an automatic endorsement of every single word in a third-party statement. So in this specific case, the like wasn't considered criminal defamation, which definitely resolved the immediate legal tension there. Section 1. Freedom of speech boundaries, where the law draws the line online. And this brilliantly illustrates the legal tightrope walk courts have to perform when we transition from a simple like to the much broader boundaries of free expression. The European Court of Human Rights is constantly asked to balance these exact opposing forces. On one side of the scale, you've got freedom of expression, right? Especially when a topic is of massive public interest or involves a highly visible public figure. But then, on the exact opposite side, we have an individual's fundamental right to privacy and reputation. When these two collide online, the courts have a really tricky job weighing those scales. Let's look at how this plays out in a real case. A private Danish citizen was actually fined by local courts for calling a right-wing, anti-Islamic politician a Nazi on Twitter. But then, the European Court of Human Rights stepped in and completely overturned the fine. Why? Well, they noted the politician was a highly polarizing public figure who regularly tested the absolute limits of free speech himself. The court ruled that the word Nazi was used as a value judgment with an adequate factual basis behind it, meaning punishing this private citizen for the tweet was actually a violation of free speech under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Section 2. The new digital public. From traditional gatekeepers to digital echo chambers. To really understand why these legal shockwaves are happening, we have to zoom out and look at the massive systemic shift in our communication landscape. Think back to the analog world. We relied on heavily edited mass media, where professional journalists acted as gatekeepers. They filtered information to create a sort of shared truth, a common ground for public debate. But the digital world? Completely different. Now, literally everyone is an author. The algorithms aren't designed to inform us. They are designed to push engagement and maximize the time you spend staring at the platform. The result is this fractured reality, a major loss of shared truth, and old laws that are just seriously struggling to keep pace. And this environment? It is the perfect breeding ground for the echo chamber. You know how it goes. These data-hungry platforms feed us exactly what we want to see just to keep us scrolling. Over time, that creates isolated filter bubbles. You end up interacting only with information that reinforces your existing beliefs, completely cut off from opposing viewpoints. It dramatically distorts our perception of public discourse, and honestly, it makes us feel perfectly safe to say things online that we would never, ever say in person. Section 3. Shitstorms and chilling effects. The chaotic symptoms of a new landscape. Now, this kind of isolation leads to some severe real-world symptoms, and it usually starts with the shitstorm. This is a rapid, massive wave of digital outrage. It's frequently accompanied by intense insults and threats, targeting a specific person or a company. Unlike traditional criticism, a shitstorm is fueled by sheer algorithmic acceleration. We've seen this happen all over the globe, whether it's the intense backlash H&M faced over a highly controversial hoodie design, or the massive wave of anger directed at Kylie Jenner for taking a tiny 60-kilometer flight in her private jet. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale, 1.6 million. That is a terrifying number of dislikes. A San Francisco gallery owner received 1.6 million dislikes in just a matter of days after a viral video showed him hosing down a homeless woman. And along with those dislikes came tens of thousands of furious comments, boycott calls, and a totally ruined online rating. It really grounds the abstract concept of a shitstorm in hard data, you know? The digital mob is incredibly swift, and its numbers are just staggering. But there is a dark flip side to all this explosive digital outrage, and it's known as the chilling effect. This is what happens when the fear of online mobs, or algorithmic penalties, or aggressive lawsuits directly leads to self-censorship. People simply stop exercising their legitimate right to free speech because the potential social or legal blowback is just too intimidating. And these aren't just hypothetical fears. These are real-world instances of chilling effects happening right now. Consider the sudden, arbitrary suspension of journalists on Twitter, or the platform banning the automated account tracking Elon Musk's private jet. We're even seeing state-level chilling effects, like border control demanding your social media history for U.S. visa applications. There was even a British tourist detained upon arrival because of a purely satirical tweet. When you know your digital footprint is being watched that closely, you inevitably start to censor your own thoughts. Section 4. Silencing voices with slaps. Weaponizing the legal system. So it isn't just the platforms creating this fear. Powerful corporate entities also weaponize this legal ambiguity through a really heavy-handed tactic, SLAP. That stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. These are abusive legal actions aimed squarely at intimidating, silencing, and bankrupting critics, particularly investigative journalists or NGOs. The whole strategy here exploits massive economic imbalances. Winning the lawsuit isn't actually the goal for them. The true goal is to bury the critic in so much legal debt and stress that it creates an immediate chilling effect on public participation. To put a very real, very intimidating price tag on this, 130,000 euros. That was the amount in damages claimed by the massive OMV corporation against a small, independent Austrian magazine called Dossier, right after they published a critical investigative report. Classic SLAP tactic. Now, fortunately, in this specific instance, a massive public outcry forced the corporation to withdraw the lawsuit, but it perfectly highlights how financial threats are routinely used to bully the press. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 5, New Rules for the Internet, the EU's legislative response. All right, so how are lawmakers actually handling this? In response to these massive issues, the EU is rolling out a highly structured legislative package, and it perfectly matches the digital problems we've been talking about to brand new legal solutions. To tackle illegal content, we have the Digital Services Act. To stop that corporate bullying, we just saw the Anti-SLAPP Directive. To prevent state interference in journalism, the Media Freedom Act. And to finally rein in those manipulative algorithms, the groundbreaking AI Act. Take the Digital Services Act, or the DSA, in action. This legislation specifically targets the heavyweights. We're talking very large platforms like Meta and TikTok that have over 45 million EU users. It forces them to implement fast notice and action mechanisms to tackle illegal content quickly. But here's the clever part. To protect free speech, it carefully avoids forcing platforms into active general censorship, while legally mandating that they make their shadowy recommendation algorithms far more transparent to us users. So, the crucial point is how the EU tackles the very technology powering these platforms. The AI Act uses a strict risk-based approach. It's like a sliding scale. If an AI poses a low or minimal risk, it can be freely used. High-risk systems, those are strictly regulated. But most importantly, systems that pose an unacceptable risk are outright prohibited. That means a strict, uncompromising ban on manipulative practices, like state-run social scoring systems designed to monitor and control civic behavior. No gray areas there. So, look at that. We've journeyed all the way from a single like on a family photo, all the way up to massive continent-wide legislation governing artificial intelligence. Our daily, seemingly tiny digital actions are deeply, deeply intertwined with this rapidly evolving legal ecosystem. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Knowing the hidden power of echo chambers, the silent threat of chilling effects, and the new laws that are watching the platforms that watch you, will you think differently the next time you hit like? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.